Welcome to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant. For those of you who don't yet know me, I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007 and am the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. I work with survivors who are sick and tired of feeling broken and unfixable, and I help them let go of the past and finally feel normal. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at www.rachelgrantcoaching.com. So today I'm very excited to have here with me my guest, Matty, who will be sharing with us about his 10,000-mile walk. That's right, walk around Europe, raising awareness of child sexual abuse in 30 languages, becoming the first male survivor in many countries to speak out publicly about being abused, and encouraging discussion of legislative reform across 47 countries, which would create an enhancement of human rights for 820 million people. So to tell you a little bit about Matty, he is an actor and playwright from Scotland who currently stars in a BBC children's show broadcast every day in the UK. A survivor of childhood sexual abuse, his uncle is now in prison, and Matthew decided to encourage other survivors to end their silence. Visiting every EU capital on foot, he encouraged every European government to discuss abolition of the statute of limitations, which prevents victims from pressing charges and allows dangerous sex offenders to live in contact with children. Finishing his walk in his nation's capital, Edinburgh, he is welcomed home by Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, received an honorary doctorate, and was awarded the auspicious title of Top Scot. I love that. We need that. I need something like that here. And just so you know, previous Top Scots include Andy Murray and J.K. Rowling, so he's in great company. And Matty now works internationally advising on global campaigns to end child sexual. So, my goodness, what a treat we are in for today. Such a powerhouse of a guy. I can't wait to have a conversation. So welcome, Matty. So great to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. It's lovely to talk to you.
Yeah. So I would love to start out with just getting a little bit of a sense of how you got to where you are. You know, how did you become an activist for this issue?
Bless you. Well, again, like you just said, in the UK I'm an actor. I'm also a playwright. And, you know, in the UK we have so many celebrity offenders, unfortunately. But there's not so many celebrities who are talking about being survivors and stuff. So I figured, you know, I had an opportunity with my situation that I could actually start to speak and see if that would encourage people. But it began, I think, in 2007. I was already on TV. I was an actor. I was writing plays, and my uncle, who had sexually abused me and my brothers, he was still working as a school teacher, and he used to run football teams of young teen boys. And I guess my brothers were all kind of struggling with different things, you know, with depression and stuff. And I just woke up one day and thought, this is insane. You know, our silence is so dangerous. By saying nothing, by not speaking out and reporting my uncle, we're literally just allowing him to continue. And so I think the problem is, I mean, how do you go and speak to your brother about sex with your uncle? I mean, where do you even begin? So I did what I knew how to do, is I actually wrote a play. I wrote a play called To Kill a Kelpie. A kelpie is like a sea creature in Scotland. It's like a mythological beast. You know, the Loch Ness Monster is a kelpie, but it's probably the most famous one, but we have various ones. So I wrote this play, and the play was about twin brothers who had been sexually abused by their uncle. And I invited my brothers to come see the show, and it was professional production and stuff. And I think they just saw the insanity, you know, the misery in our lives, and the fact that we were the ones struggling, but the person who'd caused this, you know, was still living free.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and after, I guess, for me, he abused me until I was 13, and I was 25 when I wrote the show. So after 12 years of complete silence, which within just a few weeks of the production, we finally spoke together, and we decided it was important that we report him. So after all those years of silence, the play was a catalyst, and it led to prosecution. So, and at that point, there was an organisation in Scotland called the Moira Anderson Foundation, and I went to them and I asked them to come and be present at the show and do post-show talks and stuff in case anyone found the show triggering. And that kind of created a model. We partnered with Stop the Silence in the United States, and then we took the show over to New York. And then again, after every show, I'd walk on stage, I'd tell the audience, this was inspired by true events. And we had disclosures from people in the audience, after every show. And we did that at, San Francisco, Chicago, DC.
Yeah.
But then we realized it cost $50,000 to tour a show, but it cost nothing to tour a DVD. So my brother's a filmmaker, we collaborated and shot the movie of the same story. And now that movie's touring. I did a screening of it in Denmark a couple of weeks ago, and it's just showing all over the world in universities and stuff across the States, and it's just a catalyst for discussion. And that's kind of how it began, really. And so
awesome.
It wasn't my original intention to move from being an artist to an activist, but it kind of happened through my work,
Got it. Yeah. I mean, my goodness, that's so inspiring because, the process of coming to terms with what you've been through and then making that decision to essentially break the silence and say, all right, I'm not going to kind of hold this in anymore. I'm going to talk about it. And to find your voice through art, through creativity, I think is a great thing for our listeners to be present to and aware of, that there are so many ways to go about it. And I love that it's inspired this journey of being able to then share yourself with hundreds and hundreds of people and to get your story out there. And I have no doubt to make it possible for people to step forward and come out of their own kind of cage of silence. So kudos to you for that, Matty.
I would say that what's interesting, the difference between me and my brothers is that I've never actually been medicated for depression, although I have been suicidal and stuff in my life. And I think that's because since a very young age, I began to play music, and I became an actor and also a writer. And I think it's so important that you have some sort of creative outlet in that, because it's no coincidence that any time a fascist dictator gets into power, they shut down the arts, they shut down the theatres and all the musicians, because that's how spiritually, that, and emotionally, that's how we explore things, So I think I would advise everyone to find a creative outlet, and it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it speaks to your heart. I think say go for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, love that. So you go on this journey of writing this play, and then touring it, and then developing the DVD, and now screening it, and then the next thing you're off to do this walk. Where did that come from? How did you find yourself on this 10,000-mile walk?
Well, I kind of figured, if the movie was really catalyzing discussion, and I thought, well, how do I show that to as many people as possible, because I'm from Scotland, I thought I'd love to show it in every city in Europe, but where are you going to get the funding to show a movie in every city, and then do a talk? But then I figured if I walk, obviously that'd be a lot cheaper, and I would attract the media attention, And so, my uncle used to take me to the cinema sometimes after he'd abused me, and one time he'd take me to see Forrest Gump. And, I remember Forrest runs into a city or any town, and he gets rushed by journalists who say, why are you doing this? And, bless him, Forrest just went, well, I felt like running. But if you understand the story, he was so traumatized that was what he did. He lost his mother, he'd been at Vietnam, lost his best friend. He was so full of trauma that he couldn't articulate, he couldn't speak, and it just manifested. He just started to run. So for me, it was all part of it. I was like, this is happening. Every fifth child in Europe is going to be sexually abused if we don't start talking about this now. So I was like, I need to do something massive. So it took about 2 years to plan, but May 31st, 2013, I left London. I walked to Paris and on to Luxembourg, and so I would walk to attract the media, and like you said, I spoke on TV, radio, newspapers in 30 languages, and a lot of the time the journalists would tell me, I was the first male survivor they'd ever met who spoke about it, which is crazy, because approximately every sixth man in their country is a survivor. So So that was cool. And then, if you can imagine, especially in the Eastern European countries, I would start to get emails from people who'd read about what we're doing in the media, and they would contact me with cases that, one woman sent me an email that said, "This is a picture of my son, and my husband keeps molesting him. What do I do?"
Oh, wow.
So, of course, when I was in the cities, I would speak to the authorities. I would speak to the government. I'd meet the NGOs that exist, and if I got emails like that, and I got many, I would pass them on to the people who were those particular people's support, local support. So just by walking, we catalyzed various criminal investigations. But the plan when I got to the city was to ask the government to abolish the statute of limitations. And that, as you said, it's the law that stops victims pressing charges. So you have that law across the states. So that was kind of the political goal of the project.
Man, I love this, and I jokingly say when I was talking to some folks about the chat I was going to have with you today, like, he literally has walked the walk and has done it. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, as you're going out there and you're raising awareness and you're advocating and you're, bringing in all of these people who can make a difference and, are in charge of legislation and these sorts of things, there are lots of different kind of angles that you could take. And I'm curious as to why you focused in on the statute of limitations. What do you feel it is about that in particular that's so important that we get that, off the books?
Well, that's an outdated piece of legislation that's creating a child protection crisis. I met survivors in so many countries who, they've grown up, they've in their own way overcome the psychological trauma to a certain degree, and they've been to the police and reported individuals, and the police have had to say to them, "Sorry, that crime has expired." And then we've got a situation where we have a known dangerous sex offender living in the community with children, and the authorities know about them. They've examined the evidence and they believe it, but they can't act because of this strange law. So for that very reason, and it wasn't very hard, most countries, when I started to show them this particular situation, they would move on it very, very quickly. But, and again, in the United States, I know there's various campaigners working on this issue. But on the other hand, it's, first and foremost for me, it's about child protection, and second of all, it's about your rights as a victim, as a survivor. This happened to you. In various international human rights treaties, you have the right to press charges. I mean, in 1985, the General Assembly of the UN created the Declaration of Rights for the Victims of Crime. And within that, it says you have the right to access mechanisms of justice for the harm you have suffered. So that's your human right, and that was that's your, no matter what country you're in, that's the international law. So this domestic legislation we have in every country is in contravention of international human rights treaties. So we just need to make the public aware of that and get everyone making a bit more noise about it.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it's a really important thing that you're saying there. I really want to drive that home and make sure that it's really reiterated because, when you have this experience of child sexual abuse, you don't have a voice when you're being abused. And it's very hard to speak out as a child. And then, you go into years of recovery and healing and trying to make sense of it. Many of us, and certainly I did, tried to avoid it or ignore it, and I didn't really even start paying attention to the fact that this had been something that had impacted my life until I was in my 20s. Yeah. And so just by the very nature of the crime, it is often the case that people aren't even prepared or ready to speak out about it until years and years and years later. So I really, really support what you're doing here, and I think it's just fantastic. So, Matty, you're out in this world walking, and I can only imagine all the things you saw and all the people who you met and the obstacles or challenges that had to have come up, for this kind of adventure. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced on your walk?
Well, I mean, there was daily logistical challenges, like, I had to walk every day 30 miles, and if I didn't stay on target, then, we had appointments set up in the next city with governments, and I cannot miss these meetings, so I had to walk every day. And of course, if you're walking through Europe, in the rural parts, there's going to be wild dogs. I had to get vaccinated for rabies. I had kind of repetitive chest infections because I was walking up the Baltic Sea and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, that was the physical challenge, but really overall it was just a mental challenge. But the more emails I got from people who were telling me that had inspired them to speak to a therapist or something like that, all these were little triumphs that helped build it and then move it towards the end. But I think personally the biggest challenge was some of the countries that I was in, and Scotland is has progressed a lot in the past decade. Some of the countries were very, very conservative, and a lot of the countries are very religious. And what I started to find is that those territories comes with the religion comes a fear of LGBTQ. So there's anywhere you promote homophobia, it creates this kind of wall that's impenetrable because I was abused by my uncle, and back in the 90s Scotland was quite homophobic. And that homophobia was the reason I didn't want my friends to know I had any sort of sexual contact with someone of the same sex, because in case they thought that meant I was gay, And so it's not. There's this kind of ignorance that believes that societies that are progressive, that allow marriage equality and things like that, they're eventually, they say, well, they're eventually going to allow sex for children, and where's it going to end? In actual fact, the opposite is true. It's homophobia incubates the silence of boys abused by men and girls abused by women. So we actually need to become more progressive, kind of with equality, and that helps everyone, feel free to speak, I think. So that was one of the kind of social obstacles that was quite mentally draining, I think.
That's really fascinating, Matt. Every time I talk to you, Matty, you just blow my mind, because you bring a perspective to this issue that is so unique and so on point, and highlights things that, I haven't thought of, nobody that I've talked to has thought of. And the link that you just put there, the association that you just brought to our awareness of how when we have these prejudices and we have this homophobia, how that instigates silence. And perpetuates this idea that, oh my gosh, if that happened to me, all these, the repercussions of that, and how by addressing that, we create an open door where people can feel safer and more capable of speaking up and coming out about their experiences. That's just brilliant, really looking at how the culture is perpetuating these experiences, and the perpetrators and the silence is such a beautiful approach that you have. And I just totally applaud and commend you for it, because I think it's going to have a huge impact on things.
Well, bless you.
Yeah. Thanks. So I know that, any journey, provides us an opportunity to, stretch ourselves and to learn things about ourselves and in general. I'd love to hear just what were some of the big kind of learnings for you from taking on this 10,000-mile walk?
Well, I mean, I think in my childhood I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and I was a very small child, and my uncle was my godfather. I felt completely powerless as a child, and I was, and my experiences were teaching me that I was powerless, and so I think with the walk and stuff, I realized my own power, and I would say, immediately that there's nothing special about me. I don't have anything that anyone listening to this doesn't already have. But if I say there's nothing special about me, but if there is, it's because there's something special about everyone. But I think, particularly with child sexual abuse, you end up with this compromised sense of self because of these experiences you've had. And so what I did was, when I spoke out, my uncle had said, don't tell anyone, it will tear up the family. And when I was older, I realized that was a lie, And actual fact, my family now that we all dealt with it, we're more together than we ever were, and more authentically together. And so I went from telling one person to telling hundreds of millions in 30 languages. And, whilst I was walking, I was invited to the Vatican, and I told Pope Francis himself, so I literally told God, I guess. So I told, and with every time I spoke, I felt more and more, I realized how powerful we are as survivors. We actually have the ability to speak out when you decide to. And that can be transformative for yourself and for the people around you. You can save lives by speaking. But
damn.
Yeah, I would say one of the things, like the homophobia is one example, but I started to observe in every country the survivors. I would ask them, why don't you talk about this? And I started to get different answers, and I realized that the silence is different territory by territory. You know, there's some people don't speak because of the religious environment, but other people don't speak because of the political environment. Like half of the EU used to be Soviet territory, and there's a sensibility of secrecy there. People don't get the authorities involved in their family life. And that's a different silence than if you go to, say, like Cyprus has a culture where children don't say anything negative about their elders, and that's generational. You know, that's locked into their psyche. So I've now written, the Scottish Government commissioned me to write a paper on this, and basically it's called The Quality of Silence, and it's showing how it seems like one problem, but in actual fact it's the number of reasons that people don't speak about this are infinitesimal, and so in order to address it, we have to deal with what is it's keeping them silent. You know, why don't people? What's the situation they're in that's kind of locking them in? And as you said, like I've been invited now to an organisation called ECPAT. They are based in Bangkok, but they have projects in 80 countries. And they approached me. I was speaking at the United Nations in June, and they approached me after and said, "Could you work with us on a global campaign?" And I said, "Well, sure, but you can't do a global campaign. You know, you can only do maybe 500 campaigns specific to why these people aren't speaking." You know,
right?
So that's what I'm working on now. But that came from the walk.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that report and to see how you bring all of that together. And it's such an important thing that you're doing there to help people really see that we have to have a unique approach with each culture, with each place. And I love what you said about how in beginning to tell your story, the thing that happened for you was really reclaiming your power and, you know, stepping into that full sense of self-confidence. What I love for anybody who's listening is that you don't have to go on a 10,000-mile walk to do it.
No.
You know, there are other ways. But I love that as an illustration that one of the things that we can do in our healing is to reclaim that power. And it's also beautiful to hear how in breaking the silence, far from tearing your family apart, that it really brought you guys closer together. And I think there's potential for that for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I think, like, I see the abuse leaves you with a kind of emotional cancer. And if you think of it that way, you know, like cancer, the sooner you catch it and deal with it, then, the better your chances of recovery, and it'll happen sooner, obviously. But with child sexual abuse, so, you know, with emotional trauma and cancer, you've got to go through chemo. And so when you start to go, when you go to therapy and stuff, it's the beginning. It's not the beginning of the good times. It's going to be a journey, and you know, within that there's going to be sadness and pain. But like chemo, you're doing this horrific experience to get to the better place, you know, and it's the journey. So I would say, like, I can't say going to therapy is going to be a hoot. You know, it's not going to be fun in a sense sometimes. But the reason you're doing it is to bring yourself and everyone around you to a much better place, and you do get there, and you get there sooner when you decide to start, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, you know, as I've been working with survivors of sexual abuse for about 9 years now, something that I'm more and more aware of is really taking a stand for them to overcome those fears that are there in the beginning. I mean, there can be a lot of obstacles that stand in our way before we start that healing. But boy, once we do, and if, you know, we follow, you know, if we have good support, we have good guidance, that it's totally possible to get to the other side of it, to be cancer-free, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't begin until you decide, you know. And if you don't deal with it, like cancer, it just gets worse. It doesn't go away, you know. You can just choose to not address it, and it's going to start to manifest in other things, you know. So it's better just to speak for your sake, for your own health, and for everyone around you, for children. But I would say, like, there was research done in the United States in 1998 called the ACE study. Maybe you've spoken about that on your show. And I would advise most survivors, you know, to examine that research. It's called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And it shows how something like that happening to you in your childhood leaves an imprint. You know, you're busy growing up. You know, your brain's developing, your body's developing, and someone comes in and interrupts that. And so, if you're listening to this and you have a low self-esteem, or you're listening to the things that I've done, you think, "Oh, I could never do that." I promise you that way that you think about yourself is part of the abuse. That was the imprint left in your brain as a child. You know, and because kids are they don't think negatively of themselves unless something's happened. So that
right.
see that faulty low self-esteem, that compromised psychology, that was the abuser gave that to you, and you can, as soon as you're aware of it, then you can start to to stop believing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that, because it's what I really hear you saying there is that nothing is permanent at the end of the day. That we have the opportunity to heal these wounds, on a neurological level, on a somatic level, all of that, and we really can step into that and move forward. Absolutely. Matty, is there anything that just as we're starting to come to the end of our time here together, is there anything in particular that you'd really want survivors who are listening to know? Like, if you could give them, a nugget of advice or some guidance or direction, what would you want them to know?
I would say, like, when I meet survivors, and it's a cliche and I say, but do you know it wasn't your fault? And they go, yeah. And I'm like, but when you really grasp that, when you, I mean, what I do when I'm giving talks is I show a picture of my uncle and myself, and I'm a tiny 6-year-old boy. So, I mean, they see this 30-year-old talking to them, and, they're like, okay. But when I show them that picture, go, look at that child. That child was that was me, but that little guy, he had no power against what that guy did. Right. And remember, and when you really understand that it wasn't your fault, I guess that I wish that I could really get people to not just understand that intellectually, but within your body, within your entire being, go, this was nothing to do with me, because if you once you get that, I think then you start to really kind of surmount the stuff that it's left you with, and go, this isn't mine either. This depression isn't mine. All of this stuff, this feeling of powerless, that's not mine. This was given to me by some insidious person a long time ago. And it's taken enough of my life already, so draw the line and move on.
Fantastic. Was there anything in particular that helped that really click home for you? Was there anything that happened, or any experience, or just understanding that really helped that to ring true, like from head to toe, that it wasn't your fault?
Well, I mean, on my journey, I was able to meet so many beautiful people in so many countries, and you can imagine different cultures. Everyone looked so different in every country, and everyone spoke differently, different languages. And then within everyone, within all these people, was the same sadness. And it was so heartbreaking for me to go, you're so wonderful, and that thing that happened to you wasn't your fault. And I think seeing it in other people helped me realize that about myself. And I didn't get that immediately, but I've met thousands of survivors now from so many places, and I go, but this is crazy. That wasn't your fault. This shouldn't still be affecting you. It's not fair. And I think seeing it in other people was when I went, oh, hang on. Yeah, and that's when I went back and started really showing the picture of my uncle with myself and going, look at this. That child was not in any way responsible.
I love it.
And then, and I think that's a gift that the walk gave me. That I wasn't really, I wasn't consciously aware I was going to get. But I wish everyone could experience that. But there's survivor groups. That you can go online. You can meet other survivors, and I think seeing it in other people, that natural empathy we have as human beings, you're going to start to feel it within yourself. So reach out and talk.
Thank you for that, Matty. Such good advice. So for those of you listening, take him up on that. I think it's a really good thing. Go back, remember your little self. It is hard because we, as adults who are trying to, manage the effects of abuse, we sometimes disconnect from the fact that we were so little when this happened, and we didn't have choice, we didn't have any say. There were all sorts of factors at play that made it impossible for us to protect ourselves, really. So, reconnecting with that little person and giving her or him a break, I think, is exactly on point. So thank you for that. So what's next for you here, real quick? Because I know you're working on your paper. You're working on this project. Is there another walk in the future? What? You're like, man, my feet are tired. No, Rachel, no. But
well, I mean, the thing is, I'm working on. I went to all these countries. The United Nations are doing a 2016 Global Development Strategy, and I'm pushing for that abolition to be included within that, basically new rules for the world, and that would be awesome. So that's within the next year, but I'm pushing for that. I'm within Scotland, my home country. I think, I'm focusing on all the cool things that I learned from legislation and practice from other countries, the best of the best. I'm trying to bring that back to my country to make Scotland safer for my kids. But then I'm going to go back. I'm working with guys in Bangkok, which is they've got projects everywhere, literally everywhere. So they do have a lot of stuff going on across the States, and I'll be advising them on their work. But and then I think I'm hoping to. I'm single right now and I travel so much. It'd be really nice to meet someone and have kids myself because cause
you gotta stay put long enough.
Yeah, because right now I'm in Maui just now.
They're single. Daddy's available, so.
See, I travel so much. I'm in Maui just now. Tomorrow I'm in New York. The next day I'm in Paris, and the next day I'm in London. I don't get home until next week sometime. But it's impossible to sustain a relationship when you're always on a plane. But yeah, that's my future. I hope is to, now that I've tried my best to make the world safer for kids, is to actually have some.
Oh man, and I am so a fan of you. And if anything I could do to support your efforts, please let me know. And if there are people out there listening who are, inspired by your story or what you're up to, your projects, are there ways that they can get involved and they can support you?
Yeah, we've got roadtochange.eu. You can go on my website, get in touch. I'm always happy to collaborate and stuff like that. It's really just, just get in touch. There's a million things that we could do. But I'm really approachable. I'm really love talking to new people, so just get in touch.
Okay. So, thank you for that. Well, Matty, I really appreciate you taking some time while your feet are on ground and not in the air to have a chat and to come share your story with us. You are such an inspiration, and you really, truly are so powerful and just a world changer. And I am just thrilled to know that there's somebody like you in this world who is doing just such great, beautiful work for survivors. And it's just been such a joy to really have you today. So thank you for taking the time.
Bless you, and thank you for doing your show. It sounds awesome, and I'm going to start punting it around. There's so many people I know who would benefit from hearing it, so I'll share it with my networks.
Fantastic. So remember, if you want to get in touch with Matty, you can reach out to him at matthew@roadtochange.eu or check out his website, roadtochange.eu. Support this guy. Get the word out about him. Contribute however you can, and if nothing else, take the things that he shared today to heart and let them be an inspiration and a guide to you in your own healing journey. And thank you very much for tuning in and joining us today. And don't forget to visit rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and to explore the other resources that are available on the site. And please subscribe to the podcast and come back and join us each time because we have so much to share. Until then, take really good care of you.